Welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us in the first serviced apartment webinar of 2024. And today we're going to be talking about transforming vacant buildings into apart hotels. You can see from the video that has just played that entries for the Serviced Apartment Awards are now open. I highly recommend everybody that is tuning into today's webinar to check out these awards. We've got 19 categories up for grabs, no cost to enter, and the deadline for submissions is the 22nd of March. So consider this your warning. Get on it, guys. So if you don't know me, my name is Eloise Hanson. I'm the editor of hospitality here at Serviced Apartment News, and we're an online trade publication covering the global serviced apartment, apart hotel, and extended stay industry. Our series sponsor for the first half of 2024 is Urban Rest, an operator which combines the luxury of premium hotels with the flexibility of short-term rentals. And we have a short video to play for you today. And further details about Urban Rest have been popped into the chat if you would like to learn more. Now, a quick overview of how today's webinar is going to run. We'll spend around 45 minutes chatting with our panelists today, followed by some time at the end to take any questions from the audience. So if you do have any questions, please submit these and I will get round to those as and when. And a gentle reminder that this webinar is being recorded and every registrant will receive a copy of that recording within 48 hours. So let's meet our panelists. I'm going to invite ladies to go first. So Katy, I'm going to hand over to yourself to introduce yourself, please.
Thanks, Eloise, and good afternoon. I'm Katy Ghahremani from Make Architects. I focus very much here at Make on hospitality, residential, interiors, retail, generally experiential spaces.
Exciting. Thanks, Katy. And Francesco, over to you, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Francesco Morgante. I am the head of sales and distribution for ALTIDO by Joivy. So I'm part of a bigger reality. We're just going through a rebranding. Joivy is the first comprehensive residential platform in Europe, offering a different range of living spaces to our users like co-living, student housing, short-term stay, multifamily, and co-working, but also supporting owners and investors with a range of service ranging from complete asset management to design and build and real estate investments.
Thanks a lot, Francesco. And last but by no means least, Johannes.
Yeah, I'm Johannes Kangas, and I've been establishing and leading the leading serviced apartment provider in Nordic European countries, so Finland, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, and now recently also Germany, a provider called Forenom, and I've been CEO for 22 years, and now in the role of senior advisor.
Thank you so much, Johannes. Please carry on. All finished.
Yeah, I finished.
Finished. Well, why don't I jump in here and say that all the LinkedIn profiles of our panelists have been popped into the chat. So if anybody wants to connect and carry on the conversation, I would encourage you all to do so. So a couple of context slides before we get started. These are recent headlines that have been taken from Service Department News, all of which highlight the breadth of opportunities coming to market for apart hotel conversions. So from left to right, to list what we have covered, we have a historic conversion, an office conversion, a school conversion, a department store. And on the next slide, we have a fire station, a theatre, and a cinema. So you can see that there's a lot of stock here with potential for conversions. And the cinema in particular was quite an unusual case. We saw Oxford City Council take on the development risk to actually transform that site into a community hub and apart hotel. And I think it goes to show that some councils are on the front foot when it comes to diversifying underperforming or disused assets. Now, I was at an event earlier this morning organised by SANG, which is the Serviced Apartment Networking Group in London. And some of the key takeaways that came out of that panel discussion, which was around conversions and service apartments and apart hotels and the financial considerations around those conversions. Emerging policy to relax secondary market office to hotel conversion is very much coming, which shows that the City of London is also looking ahead to diversify its office use. And to recite some stats that were shared during this panel discussion, in London, there is 420 million square feet of vacant office space. In Manchester, you're just over 67 million square feet, and in Birmingham, there's around 42 million square feet. What is interesting to note that over 71% of that office space is EPC rating C or lower, which, given that commercial assets need to achieve an EPC rating B by 2030, speaks a lot about the retrofit and all the energy efficiencies and all those considerations that's needed in order to update these buildings. So let's talk about transforming vacant buildings into apart hotel. And Johannes, you've been leading Forenom for the past 22 years, I believe you said during your introduction. You've got there's a huge portfolio in the Nordics. But can you please kick off with an introduction or an overview of what apart hotel conversion projects exist within the portfolio?
Yeah, we have that's interesting, and one detail about Forenom is that we are concentrating fulfilling our business customers' kind of employee accommodation needs. So we are not that kind of traditional hotel organizing nice hotel somewhere in a nice spot, but more like a workforce moving purpose background, or how to say the issue. And to fulfill that purpose, we have been going usually first through the existing buildings. And that's why we currently in our portfolio, we have over 30 properties where the previous use has been something else. Apart hotels are somewhere, I think, 13 to 15, depending how do we interpret, is it exactly apart hotel or should it be interpreted as a serviced apartment building. And the typical one is office building converted to apart hotel. And typically the case is that there's an office building, but it's not up to date, not good for current purpose. It's hard to sell. And the owner has to, okay, now, just like you explained in this current situation in London, that the owner has to think that, okay, what I'm gonna do. And the hope of filling up it without remarkable investment is maybe hard. And in those cases, we have been then counting, okay, what is the conversion cost? and what is the kind of rent payment ability.
Mm-hmm.
And I can bet that we have been counting and researching like maybe 3-4 times more than we have. So there are quite many cases that we haven't been finalizing. So this is not always easy.
Can I ask something that I've heard recently is that deals are taking a very long time to come through. Is that being echoed in the Nordics and the target markets where you're looking to expand, and what are the other key development challenges around taking an existing building and looking to convert them?
Yeah, of course there are many challenges, and that's the hard point. And just like we all understand, the ESG environment and this carbon neutrality is forcing us to move to that direction, but it's not easy. If I would say one major challenge, I would say that maybe 10 years ago, the major challenge was get the authorities understand that there's actually this kind of living need, what is between normal living and hotel living. Mm. And actually, we have even one building where the permit says that this building will be converted following the strictest instructions of the apartment buildings and also strictest instructions of the hotel building. So it might end in that kind of situation where you are kind of having double standards, and then you know that you are really easily in a point that it's not feasible. Mm. So the authorities, are they kind of claiming if you have an office building built on 80s, and they're claiming that, hey, that you have to get all the regulation and restrictions up to date to today's standards, then you can really easily say that the feasibility might be quite far away. Mm-hmm. But then if you can find this kind of the good middle way between saving the old building mm-hmm. and still fulfilling in some way the current restrictions, and you have a good cooperation, then it's possible on that side.
I read an article earlier today that said that there are 600,000 commercial properties in the UK that are historical buildings, so pre-1919. In order to get those buildings up to standard, necessary standards by 2050, the current workforce will need to double, because the specialized skill set that is needed in order to retrofit and improve these buildings is quite an expert one. So if that if that highlights the scale of the challenge, I don't know I don't know what does.
Yeah, it doesn't make it easier that it's not usually straightforward if apart hotel is interpreted as a hotel property or is it interpreted as an apartment building. Mm. That's giving a kind of one multiplier, and it depends about it. Usually the construction authorities are really local and they might do their own interpretations. Mm-hmm. In that case, it's really important that you have experienced architects with you who understand the property type.
But before we bring the architect into this conversation, so Katy, hold that thought for one moment. Johannes, is the role of the operator changing during the planning process? Are operators having to become more proactive in looking at deals, trying to source deals, trying to find the investor in order to sign off deals? How would you say the role of the operator is changing, especially when you find a site and you're looking to submit that planning permission?
Yeah, I guess it's a operator role is definitely it's a big role, and it I would say that if you're keeping in a like a historically more powerful model of having a really standard big brand book and really concept oriented hotel model, then it's much harder to find full fit. But then if you are more flexible and you are more sales oriented, kind of thinking that, hey, that how to make this building feasible, how to find it, and manage to find a good cooperation between the kind of floor plans and purposes in different areas, and then kind of max out the income and minimize the renovation cost. Then you are able to find more or you're more likely to find the solution. But it's never kind of easy. And I have seen it many times that if you have a really tight concept book, might be that you are of course it's then easier to choose which ones are okay for your concept, but then it's kind of limiting the opportunities.
Eloise, I would like to jump in very quickly on what Johannes just said, because we as an operator, we are very much taking part of this whole, planning strategy. We're currently, for example, talking with some developers from some big opportunities that best case scenario will kick off in 2028 in Madrid and in Paris, in areas that are being developed or redeveloped. And we are putting on the table a strategy that puts together different business mix. So properties that have hundreds of units can be built in a different way depending on what kind of share of those units we want to allocate to short-term rentals, what share we want to allocate to co-living or to student accommodation, in order to find that sweet spot that allow us to maximize the return on investment for the owners that of course we can provide as an operator.
There's definitely a great investment case, I think, for dividing the use classes, especially under one roof. It helps to minimize the risk. It's probably why we're seeing so much investment go into mixed use developments. And that actually ties in quite nicely with my questions for Katy. How are planners' attitudes changing towards conversion projects? What are you seeing from a different perspective there, Katy?
Thanks, Eloise. Just picking up on your point about mixed use before I answer that question, one of the other things that's super attractive about mixed use is by having a mixed use scheme, whether that's commercial, hospitality and residential all together, it's fantastic for placemaking and for bringing a place alive throughout the day and the evening and weekends. And it builds a sense of community, and that's something that obviously the planners are very interested in, as well as all the people that it will affect. In terms of planning and conversions, I think if we take a step back, particularly in a lot of city centre locations, and you touched on this earlier in terms of office space that is available, we're seeing the commercial market become split into grade A space and space that is subpar. Occupiers for the commercial market are really looking to take grade A space. They're trying to get all their talent back into the office, and really a subpar office building isn't doing that. So it's creating a lot of surplus of subpar space, which is a fantastic opportunity for conversion. This then ties in with the planners' aspirations, particularly in the central London boroughs, but generally throughout. We're seeing a retrofit first attitude towards reuse of buildings. So the planners want to see evidence about why a building cannot be reused, and therefore that allows them to be much more open to the idea of changing use classes. Changing use classes obviously does have an impact in terms of sometimes employment numbers. Some councils don't necessarily want to see a reduction in employment, so we have to put forward cases for whether it's hospitality of whatever type, having employment within it, obviously, which you do, rather than residential, which doesn't. and things like affordable housing, etc. But they are very, very open to changing use classes to bring different uses into existing buildings. And when you look like at a borough like the City of London itself, the Square Mile, they are really looking to create more vibrancy through bringing in more hospitality-based schemes, whether that's apart hotels, etc., because they recognise, and COVID really showed this, by having just a mono use within the City of London, it was a dead space throughout COVID, because nobody was going there, because it was only office buildings, and therefore that killed all the other businesses that were reliant on that, for example, the F&B, etc. So creating more of a mixed use place and city, whether it's within a building or within a neighborhood, is definitely an ambition as well.
To follow up on your point around the evidence for changing a use class, again, something that came out of this morning's event is we ended the event on challenges. What are the challenges that are facing the market? And there was a lot of conversation around uncertainty, geopolitical tensions, high interest rates, etc. And it was noted that if you can demonstrate certainty during a planning permission, so for example, you are taking an office and you're looking to convert that to an apart hotel. If you can prove that in decades' time, that hotel can also be repurposed into residential, you are demonstrating some degree of certainty and therefore reducing some kind of risk. And so with that in mind, Katy, is your role changing as an architect regarding the sort of longevity of those use classes? And perhaps more to your point around the retrofit, is it more around the full life cycle of that building?
Absolutely. I mean, when we are looking at retrofit and for planning, we're having to submit whole life cycle carbon impacts for the building. In terms of flexibility and changing, for example, from apart hotel to residential, I always like to think about all of these different use classes as living. It just depends on how long you are staying in one place. So if it's a hotel room, it might be one night, to an apart hotel might be longer, to residential, which is longer again, co-living. So I always think about it as a sliding scale, and you kind of sit on that, and the level of amenity is also on a sliding scale to correspond with the offer and the brand that is going in. So we're seeing a lot of amenity in some residential, we're seeing limited service offers on some of the hospitality. So it's all like the same kind of gradation. And a lot of buildings will lend themselves to that flexibility of change. Changing from apart hotel to residential, obviously very, very easy. It's only about length of stay in reality. So it's more of a management issue rather than a design and architecture issue. But yes, absolutely, flexibility is key from an investment point of view, if nothing else.
I'm going to talk to Francesco in a moment about amenities, particularly from a guest point of view. But Katy, from a very practical standpoint here, is there, we saw earlier during the context, there's a whole load of stock that is clearly has potential for conversion, but is there a type of building or a kind of building that does lend itself very well to apart hotel conversions?
The easiest buildings to convert are buildings that are, in terms of floor depth, no more than 20 meters, let's say, because we know that then we don't have to drop through any atriums, or we're not going to have any dead space within the heart of the building, that we can actually use the whole floor plate for double stacked units on either side of a corridor. But to be honest, any building just takes creativity to convert it. And the flip side, although that sort of building that I just described might be a 1960s office building that might convert very, very in a very straightforward way, other buildings, like you showed the cinema option, which might be more challenging to convert, might in a way end up being more appealing because they end up having more character because of the way they've been converted and the creativity needed to create kind of space in the middle to drop an atrium in, or however you're going to tackle that depth of floor plate, or converting a church. It has character and personality, and I think people don't want vanilla schemes anymore. They want a sense of place, they want to know where they're living, they want a story and a narrative that goes with it.
I can see Francesco nodding his head in total agreement there. So why don't we come to you next, Francesco? And I would like to talk about, for a moment here, around guest preferences. I mean, how are you seeing the travelers' demands and needs shift in terms of what they now require from amenities, space, and services?
So, transforming vacant buildings into apart hotel, it's currently a very interesting trend in our industry, and we do believe that if you understand your guest preferences, then you can really be ahead of the project. So I could talk for hours, but I don't have that much time on this topic. So I would like to focus possibly on the three main aspects from my point of view, that are tech integration, work and leisure mix, and wellness and sustainability. So, technology, of course, nowadays has become somehow of a commodity. So it is very, very important from our point of view to always be ahead of the landscape and the market, because it's there are certain things that, of course, now guests are demanding, but you can keep on adding more on top. So I remember when just 20 years ago, we were putting Wi-Fi into the hotels, and that was, guests now need Wi-Fi. Say, yeah, of course. Now guests not only take for granted that works greatly, but also that they can stream in 8K from multiple devices at the same time. But when it comes to the tech integration for the planning of apart hotels, for example, what we see is that something that is very appreciated nowadays from the guests is the possibility of using keyless, to having keyless access, or small things like for the travelers, instead of having things like having to travel with their adapters, just having electric sockets that are already offering the USB option. When it comes instead to work and leisure, we know how that many guests nowadays are seeking spaces that cater to both work and leisure. So of course, providing comfortable workspaces either within the unit itself or as a communal co-working areas can really be appealing. This is something that we did, for example, in a recent project in Paris. And finally, of course, wellness and sustainability. We know that as a global trend, health and wellness consideration keep on gaining importance. So features like fitness centers, wellness programs, bike storage, or electric vehicle charging station, and eco-friendly practices overall can really attract environmentally conscious guests. But then on top of this, I would also add other things like flexible spaces, or even something that we would really like to work now on, that is feeling part of a community. So this is something that we already did with other kind of accommodation, but we would like to work more also from the apart hotel side of things. And in the end, regardless of what you do, I believe that they all fall under the big bell of proactive communication, because I'm a salesperson, and offering something without communicating it in advance to the guests and not giving them the possibility of perceive the value of what we're offering them is just it's just pointless.
Mm-hmm. You've just highlighted some brilliant considerations of in terms of the amenities and the services that can be, I suppose, included within projects. But what's the decision-making process, or what's the thought process behind actually what to and what not to include? And I say this because with conversion projects, you are working within the constraints of a building. There are going to be some instances where you have a space. Do I add a gym or do I add a co-working area?
So I believe that the general answer to this question is it depends. So it really depends on the kind of guest that you want to cater to, where the property is located, and overall how you want to position yourself in the market. So, for example, with the development that you were showing earlier, the fire station in the Westminster area. We found a development that was supposed to go on the market for luxury living, and we actually fell in love with the project because it was already ticking all these boxes that we would have focused on if we were part of the development. So, of course, being ahead of the CO2 plans, the CO2 reduction plans for the whole building, the fact that historic parts of the building itself have been preserved and have been kept as part of the new development, because I'm as a salesperson, I'm a storyteller. So just the fact that I can sell a story about a former fire station to our guests gives me a competitive advantage in the marketplace. But then, like all these other things about having a lower impact in terms of not only CO2 footprint, but also gas and electricity and water consumption, having solar panel on the roof, are all things that made huge difference from our point of view. So what not to include, then it really depends. Because you want to focus more on a corporate market, then possibly you would like to be already ahead of that planning and have units that are fitting better the corporate demand, so studios 1 and 2 bed. But again, are you depending on also the legislation? Like in the example, in London, there are like a certain kind of limitation. You know that if you want to cater to longer stays, then you will have certain amenities that are linked to the everyday comfort that need to be part of the plan. Otherwise, you won't be able to have guests that are staying 6 or 9 months if they don't have like a washer dryer, if they don't have a comfortable sitting and working area, if they do not have laundry facilities, and so on and so forth.
Eloise, can I just add to that point that Francesco was making about choice of amenities? And this is learnings that we've brought through from our residential projects, is that we also like to look at the neighborhood and how the building will connect into the neighborhood and what's on offer in the neighborhood. Can we bring, if there is a fantastic gym around the corner, do we need to duplicate that? Or would it be better to provide something else? If people are cycling in, can we partner with a local cycle shop and have, for example, a cycle workshop within the building? Is it better to have co-working space? So looking at where the building sits and what is around it, and building those ties again with service providers and amenity providers in the neighborhood also increases the sense of place and that sense of community that people want to feel, especially if they don't live permanently in a place. So they are staying, for however many months, etc.
This is a great segue to the topic of 15-minute cities, something that we have explored here in the editorial team at IHM. And before we move on to this, I'm just going to mention that if anybody has any questions for any of our panelists, please obviously submit these using the chat function or the Q&A function. But Johannes, I want to gain your perspective, experience, insights here regarding the investment case for 15-minute cities in the Nordics.
Yeah, I guess that it's always, it requires that the existing building is already kind of B class or even lower, so that the owner doesn't need, or the valuation has to be so that it allows the renovation to happen. Then of course the market position there should be so that there is a demand on the market for that kind of product. So there should be an operator who is willing to kind of commit to it for a longer period of time and has the belief of creating good income for the owner. And there I think that the operators role is a big, that you have to kind of believe to your product and your sales ability and kind of a revenue providing ability. Then the investment case, of course, right now the investment market is hard, but now the good side might be that you might be able to do the renovation with a cheaper price, and also if you are able to catch an investor who has money in the pocket right now it would be an excellent timing to do, because the values are down. So now if you're now doing the case, you might hit actually a really good market spot when the building is ready. Also, most likely in many areas the authorities have a lot more room to consider these kind of cases and have more time to kind of even be with you and use time or a proper time for the case, as it's not always that way if you have lots of new build properties ongoing on the area.
We haven't yet really dived into ESG much. It's been touched on during our conversation, but I want to stick with you, Johannes, for this one. But how is the ESG agenda influencing the company's growth plans, and in particular, has it changed what you guys look for in a site?
Yeah, it definitely is doing that. In big picture, we think that we are kind of catalysator, or how would you say, on the market, kind of making it possible to use flexible and temporary housing as a market, so we wouldn't need that many apartments available. And actually, it's easing up the rental apartment situation, or easing up many other these kind of temporary items. And what we see that all the time, more and more people are traveling after the work. It's not that kind of big culture yet in Europe as it is in US, but it's growing. And there are many trends what are supporting. So we are not going towards a market where people live in the same apartment for 40 years and work for same like employer for 40 years. So that's kind of supporting that we should have more flexible living options, and that's a kind of a bet for the future. And then when you come to that point, are you building all the buildings as a new buildings? And as we know that the biggest part of the construction carbon emissions are coming from building new houses and new concrete, especially concrete. And then if you are able to save the old building, it's never hitting the level of the new building's emission level, even you do a quite big renovation. That's how we see in the Nordics, at least, where we have maybe some kind of different calculation because of the colder climate than in the southern Europe, but that's or Western Europe. But that's our point of view. But we have, what I have to say, most of the customers, they have started to ask or even discuss in the customer meetings about our ESG matters and our responsibility, and how do we act as a player. And it's interesting that it's all the time bigger role, but still it's not affecting on a level that somebody would book a smaller hotel room in able to save the nature and save the globe.
Yeah, I've heard this echoed before in conversations, that there's the early signs that it's of interest, but is it influencing decision making in terms of accommodation types, in terms of paying a premium, for example? I think that data is yet to come.
Yeah, actually this morning I had one discussion that right now might be that you are able to finance a project where the kind of ESG standard for the property is not yet on the place. But then this investor said that they know already that they will face a challenge in 10 years. So the kind of future of the building might be endangered as a valuation matter.
Mm-hmm. I want to bring Katy into this conversation here, as I know you have experience with regeneration projects, which has a big ESG slant. And just doing a bit of sort of Googling online around sort of regeneration projects, the headlines that I get is this unsuccessful project versus this successful project. And it just immediately brought a question to my mind, is that what does make a successful regeneration project? So Katy, over to you.
I think a sense of belonging and community, creating community, it's all the softer things. So actually a lot of regeneration projects end up being a lot about the spaces between the buildings rather than the building itself. And one of the things that we talk about when we talk about ESG is not just the E bit of it, the environmental bit, which we've been doing for quite a few years, but it's actually the S, the social impact that a project would have on its local community and the people within the building. And I think this is something that we're all trying to get our head around, but particularly for conversion projects, looking at the uses of the ground floors and how we can give back to the community or create spaces which the community can use is really, really important. We're currently working on a project in North London in Crouch End called Hornsey Town Hall, which has got a part hotel as part of it. But as part of that, when our client bought the site, they had to commit to providing a certain percentage of the spaces back to the community for a certain percentage of the time. And I think this is actually a benefit to the scheme. It's not a detraction because it creates vibrancy in the building and in the place, and will hopefully, when the project finishes, make it a very, very attractive destination for everyone, not just the people who want to live and work there.
I suspect you have a very creative challenge there of trying to look at the square footage in order to try and maximize wherever possible, and then you know that floor plan, and all with a view to increase value. There's a reason, you know, why these conversions take place. It's to ultimately increase value.
We sometimes talk about the halo effect. So sometimes having, for example, a hospitality element might not be the highest value part of it in itself, but will increase the value for all the other elements because it creates, as I said, a sense of place and all the things that people want, and brings character and personality to the place. So it's kind of more nuanced than just looking at how much space can we create in terms of value generation. It's actually looking at the bigger picture, and it's quite difficult to quantify. Luckily, that's not my job to quantify.
Which as that project is you know, it's an old town hall. I actually did a hard hat tour of that site, and it's truly incredible. And I mentioned earlier around the sort of 600,000 commercial projects that are historical here in the UK. Katy, could you highlight just some historical considerations around conversion projects? I imagine that they're very complex, maybe difficult to get through in terms of planning permission, but could you just provide an overview?
So that particular project was a listed building, grade 2 star listed. So we had to make sure that people like Historic England were happy, as well as the planners, because they were statutory stakeholders to the process. I think with a building like that, which was a town hall building, as you said, it's really important to work with the fabric of the existing building. So the existing building had numerous amounts of offices within it, civic office space, which was divided into quite conveniently room size elements. So working with the plan form rather than against it was really important. We then always have the balance of sustainability versus heritage, and having a really robust conversations about if we want to make this building, for example, more sustainable with the windows, how do we go about that? Because we need to introduce, for example, secondary glazing and the impact on heritage. But I think those conversations at least are happening. Heritage isn't just trumping sustainability. So it's a very topic that's very alive at the moment, and everybody wants to make sure that the building, from a sustainability point of view, it also obviously reduces running costs. So it's a win-win all round.
Francesco, I'd like to bring you in here to talk about the operational challenges, or maybe considerations, challenges and opportunities and solutions when actually managing converted projects, be it historical, like your fire station, or perhaps other conversions within the portfolio.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about my personal experience on the topic with Joivy, because successfully managing converted apart hotels, of course, requires a combination of strategic and sales planning that has to be, of course, combined with technological integration and focus on guest satisfaction. So I believe that if we address this operational consideration, then we can enhance the overall experience for both short-term and long-term guests, while also, of course, focusing on profitability. So let's start with technology integration. What's the challenge here? Implementing and maintaining technology, for example, for keyless entry, automation, guest communication can be complex. So, for us, the solution is investing in a robust property management system, integrated technology solutions, and of course, regularly update, maintain the system so we can ensure smooth operation and also a positive guest experience. Another topic is probably staff training and staff rota flexibility. So where is the challenge here? Staff may need, of course, training to adapt to new technologies and operational procedures in converted apart hotel settings. And guests might have an issue with us, for example, as an operator, and not offering 24-hour front office service. So for us, the solution is, on a side, to provide comprehensive training program for the staff to familiarize with the new technologies, the standards, the service standards, and the unique aspects, of course, of managing every specific apart hotel, but also, regularly updating training programs, but also, this is very important for us, be flexible with the staff rota and offer 24 hours remote support when staff is not on site. Then I would say that another challenge is around maintenance and housekeeping, where managing the maintenance of both common areas and individual units in a cost-effective manner can be a big issue. So as a company, our solution is to implement a proactive maintenance schedule, conducting regular inspections and investing quality materials in order to reduce, the frequency of repair. But also, and I go back to the previous point, we also use technology to streamline housekeeping operation and of course maintenance operation, so we can ensure that the standards are met. And if I can add a last one very quickly, because usually this is something that we take into consideration before, like going in the market, is the regulatory compliance. So the regulation is evolving, is changing all the time. So the challenge, of course, is navigating and complying with different local regulations for short-term rentals, for example, but also safety standards or zoning laws. So, our solution is always be part of the proactive conversation, stay informed about the local regulation and work closely with the legal advisor so we can ensure compliance, and we proactively address any changes that might impact the operation. So, for example, with everything that was happening in Scotland, we were way ahead of the new regulation, and we started talking with more than a year in advance with the stakeholders in order to understand what the options were depending on the evolution of regulation.
Yeah, right. Keeping up with all the changing regulations is something that my colleague Paul Stevens is very, very good at. He heads up short-term rentals, and he's a fount of knowledge. So if anybody is interested in the regulatory landscape, I'd highly recommend you go and have a word with my colleague Paul. But something that I would like to touch on to close off this conversation is cost. Francesco, you mentioned it, sometimes you will need to invest in technology. You will need to invest in solar panels. You will need to invest in the entire conversion and redevelopment of a project. Now, Johannes, I was in Madrid earlier this week at AOHIS, which is a hotel investment conference, and it was mentioned on a panel that office to hotel conversions were certainly deemed as an opportunity, but it's very, very difficult to execute. It actually takes a lot of skills and experience in order to successfully convert that office to a hotel. Now, how do you assess the feasibility of a potential conversion? Like, what are those financial considerations that you take on?
Yeah, that's a hard point, and it starts from a point that if you can spot that construction company salesman who wants to sell small renovations, please inform me myself, but I haven't met one. So, and of course you know the market nature, but that's the point, is that of course construction company wants to do as big renovation at the time, because there's the kind of a certain limit that you anyway, when you come to the construction site, it's easier to do basically bigger renovation, and it's better business for the construction company, and that has a kind of natural power to push up the kind of renovation and the conversion price. And then you should really know yourself that what are the essential parts to be done, and I think that's the hardest point. And then you should really know that what are the other things, what are in this certain property doing the big difference. Is it ventilation, fire regulation, or some renewals in common, or historic issues what make change the game? And is there, if it's a historic one, is there some support from government or so, or like possible to get, and so on? But then, and of course these things, they have always both sides. If you have a historic building and you renovate it nicely, the value is higher, so it's usually has the other side of the story at the same time. Also, it's about that the longer future and perspective. So as an operator, can you commit can you commit for longer term for the same property, and do you believe that there is really need for longer term? Because otherwise you might be in a where the challenge really is that if you say that you are only able to commit for 10 years, then it might be that it's not the case, because then it's the payback time is not sufficient.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in some cases, I'd imagine it will probably cost, hypothetically speaking, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it might cost more to actually convert a site than to knock it down and build up new again. But then you are most likely will pay more down the line if that's the case.
Yeah, it's easily, and it's because of the construction industry is kind of trying to protect their own stuff. So they try to sell more and newer stuff and more modern things. And if you say that, hey, let's save something, they think that, okay, they're not going to sell that much, and it's not that good business. So basically, you have to always kind of try to stabilize between kind of thin line that, okay, what is enough and what is needed and what is something what would be nice to have. And it's a challenging environment. There's just like Francesco told, there's this technical and technical perspective and what the customer does need today. And then of course kind of look and feel things. Then really practical thing, how the ventilation is working, or are the regulations met, kind of that there's enough air for every person, and so on.
Johannes, finally, before we finish today's conversation, I just want to touch on financing and funding certain developments. And I know it's incredibly difficult at the moment to secure financing. There's a lot of cost pressures out there. When do you expect this to change?
There are some marks already on the air that it's changing, but like all the marks look like that it's not going to happen fast. But the interesting thing is that still in the US, the market is really running and working. So it's kind of more like European issue. And I would say that it's pretty much local. When there's a local demand, then there will be also investments. And there will be still on this market, there will be good cases ongoing. And sometimes the driver might be that it's actually certainly more expensive to keep the property empty than do the conversion. And then you might have a case. So the financing might be there because of that. Yeah. And that's interesting because of the energy prices and higher property taxes and so on.
I mean, just the cost of keeping a vacant hotel somewhat operational, particularly, for example, during the pandemic when hotels had to close but had to still maintain some kind of operational, openness. I can imagine the cost was pretty high. But on that note, I can see that we are fast approaching 3 p.m. So our allotted time is up. So I just want to say a quick thank you to Johannes, to Francesco, to Katy for your insights. We are going to leave this webinar open for an extra 2 minutes right at the end, just to allow our audience members to follow up on any of the links that we have popped into the chat today, including those ever important LinkedIn profiles of our speakers. So if you do have any questions or would like to follow up, I encourage you to do so. So some closing slides here. I just want to highlight our next webinar in the series, being hosted by my colleague George Sell. It's taking place on the 22nd of February, and we are going to be exploring extended stay distribution. Lots to discuss there, and the link to register has been popped into the chat. Would love to see you there. And if you're interested in working with us, either across our digital events such as these webinar series or our in-person events, please do get in touch with my colleague Rav. Her details are on your screen and also into the chat. So I just want to say thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to our sponsors, Urban Rest, and thank you once again to our panelists. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we will see you again on the 22nd of February. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Or IHM for short. IHM is the #1 brand to engage with decision makers in hospitality and real estate. Our 4 multimedia brands lead their respective sectors with breaking news, comments, trends, and opinion across a variety of multimedia solutions. We provide an inspirational community to connect people through world-class events, webinars, podcasts, award schemes, and much more. But let us share our story of who we are and what we do. Over 10 years ago, Piers & George had a light bulb moment to provide expert opinion, comments, and low-cost digital content. And so they went on a journey over the past decade, creating media platforms to serve the hospitality and real estate industries. We now have an engaged audience with a reach of over 60,000 monthly visitors across our website, 48,000 of our email database across all the sectors, and over 67,000 across our social channels. Everything we do believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. We make things simple and very easy to work with us. And we're a friendly bunch too. We offer creative solutions to help you achieve your business goals. Read, watch, listen, meet with IHM. Contact us for a chat today. Just look at some of the brands we have worked with recently.